as Christian, as far as Red Bull, as far as the 2024 season. We need to talk about Lewis Hamilton and his replacement going forward. But you know what, you guys, let me holler you guys first, because I appreciate you each and every single time, each and every single one of them, irrespective of our differences in an opinion and our arguments that we're about to have. Peter, Lady T, Chad, Salim, I hope you're all fantastic. Switch, thank you so much for joining. Lady T, can I address your comment very quickly? We're going to have to back and forth, and this is the point of the Cameron F1 channel, of which Peter Windsor is a massive contributor. Absolutely humongous. Peter's more of a mentor than a friend, but he is both. He is both. And at times, Peter will... Listen, I'll always defer to Mr. Windsor because he's infinitely more knowledgeable about the sport than I. But we will go back and forth, and I will push back on him from time to time. Lady T, let me address your point. Peter, firstly, this is the Cameron F1 channel, not the Peter Windsor channel. So for you addressing Peter on this channel, you might want to address him on his channel. But you also have the choice to not listen if you're interested, but to tell Cam to stop doing what he's doing, because you find what's currently in the news cycle sensational and ridiculous. And you're right, Lady T, you've characterized Peter very well there. He doesn't address the rumor whilst it's still a rumor. Mr. Windsor, my mentor and my very good friend, to whom I will defer on these matters each and every single time. We'll wait till the news hits proper before he addresses. But this is the Cameron F1 channel, right? And I want to talk about it. Lady T, you hit on something that's really, really pertinent here. And Matthew Said of the Times writes a fantastic article addressing all of this Christian Horner stuff. And then again, it is rumor and speculation, and we need to frame it as such. But Lady T, what I'm not going to do, what I will not bow to nor be subjected to, is this type of censorship. Just because we are Red Bull fans, that doesn't mean we can't talk to the news, because BBC have done it, the Times have done it, all reputable, the Guardian has done it, all reputable outlets have talked to this Christian Horner situation. They've addressed it as speculation, and they've said that it is conjecture, that we don't know what's happened. We don't know what the outcome's going to be, but there are sources and these guys are speaking to it. So why then are they not allowed to speak to it? What, because it's Christian Horner and he's a big personality and he has all these accolades over the past 10 years since he's been in F1 2005. All right, let's not do that, Lady T. I think that's completely ridiculous. And by the way, if you read the Matthew Said article in the Times, he speaks to all this, and this is Horner's gift and curse, right? This is what he does so brilliantly, in that he can simultaneously almost play victim and oppressor. He does the us and them mentality, and that's okay. I think not okay. Okay is the wrong term, right? If that's what Christian Horner needs to do to get him results, to extract the best out of his team and optimize for a World Drivers' Championship, then I understand. That's not necessarily my style of management, but I understand it. But then you have to argue the flip side also, that there are downsides which are material on the back of doing that. And the Matthew Said article on the Times website absolutely nails that. Yeah, Tristan, we're there today. I'm not messing about. Lady T set me off, man. And blessed Lady T for the question. But the tone of it. There is a thing in F1 called toxicity, right? And confirmation bias. There is cognitive dissonance all over the shop. But I don't like it. I don't like it because I try and be objective as far as possible, wherever possible. And I don't like it when Red Bull fans back a Max Verstappen or a Red Bull to the point where it's just unjustifiable, to the point where the position is untenable. I can't tolerate it. And similarly with Lewis Evangelis, when Lewis has done something wrong, it's my job as an F1 YouTuber, as a content creator, to call it as I see it, right? So I will call out a Lewis, and I will call out a Max, and I will call out a Christian Horner for when they've done something wrong. I'm not going to be saying, oh, well, let's not talk about this because it's just, well, I'm not going to condemn Christian Horner to a crime that we don't know, for a crime that we don't quite know just yet whether he's committed. Say crime very loosely, but don't talk about it until we know more. What BBC are talking about it. Why don't we criticise them? Well, because BBC are a reputable outlet known for decent journalism and integrity, but nobody's pointing the finger. But Cameron F1 can't come on here and talk about it. Why not? What's the discrepancy there? You guys forgive me getting a bit enthused, but sometimes I don't like the double standards that partisan fans of F1 hold YouTubers and content creators to account on. I think it's counterintuitive, and it's not very productive, nor is it edifying. But again, you know what? Like, I don't want to get too harsh on the F1 fan base, because I understand that sports fans all over the world have this partisanship and confirmation bias, but that's not something that I hate. I'm allergic to that by definition. Hence why you see me having these conversations with the likes of Peter Windsor and Nasher, and obviously the guys on the Shakedown, Sir Baxty and Shez. Each and every single time we're going to hold each other to account. Shez has been smashing me today for my anti-Charles Leclerc rhetoric, which we'll get to, which there is evidence to support. But listen, there is redeeming feature to challenge. You have to be able to hold people's feet to the fire, and that's what Matthew Syed in his Times article is doing to Christian Horner, not based upon these most recent apparent alleged indiscretions, but based on his behaviour down the years, right? Let's talk to Christian Horner, and you guys, listen. Zoe, I'm not having it. I'm not having it today. I mean, you're going to get more of these over there, but I'll talk about where the channel's going in the next 30 minutes, but it's going to get... I've got to talk to the thing, man, because it's... Can we talk about it? Right, okay, let's talk about it, Salim. Christian Horner, here's what we do know. There is an independent investigation that Red Bull Group, not the guys in Milton Keynes, the guys based in Salzburg even, have instituted, and it's been led by an independent investigator via a barrister. They're looking at all what's gone on. Apparently there's a dossier of evidence. Apparently, depending on which publication you're looking at, whether that's the Das Telegraph or The Telegraph in the Netherlands or BBC, they're all saying similar things, tweaked a little bit the language. Here's what the alleged action is. Line stepping, being overly aggressive in his management style, and potentially having inappropriate interactions with a female employee, whatever that means. And again, here's where it gets techie, because I don't want to delve into the speculation too much, especially since Christian Horner, as at now, is an innocent man being investigated. This is the truth. What does this mean, though, is the big deal for Red Bull going forward, and I'll get to that shortly. But timelines-wise, the investigation happened, the back and forth between Horner and the barrister who is lead of the independent investigation on behalf of the guys at Red Bull Group, not Red Bull Racing, which is critical. That happened on Friday, and it wasn't just an hour thing, it was an all-day thing, up to 8 hours, sources say. So people are taking this seriously. Christian Horner's done the right thing. He's lawyered up as well, and is obviously denying all these accusations and defending his stance as he seeks to continue to be the team principal of Red Bull Racing going into the 2024 season. So we have to, as viewing fans and fans of Red Bull and F1 all around the world, we've got to let that play out. Craig Slater said they're going to Salzburg, Red Bull Racing, Red Bull Group critically, so your head office guys, they're keen to let this play out, and however long it takes, if it goes beyond February 15th, when I think the Red Bull livery is meant to be launched, then it will go beyond. They're going to be diligent, and they're going to let this thing play out over however many weeks or months it takes to play out. Obviously, peddlers, it's very inconvenient for Red Bull Racing if this drip feeds into the start of next season. You don't want that. It's inconvenient even if it drip feeds into late next week when the Red Bull Racing livery launch is scheduled to take place. It's not ideal, but critically, these guys are, what we're hearing, what sources are saying, speculation, of course, allegedly, of course, caveat all of what I'm saying with that. But timelines aren't important for the bods at Salzburg. The likes of Oliver Mintzlaff, who potentially could be the next TP depending on the outcome of this investigation. They don't care how long this takes. And that leads me to think, peddlers, speculation, humongous conjecture incoming from Cameron F1. That leads me to think, if I'm a betting man, that the guys and girls at Salzburg might not necessarily be keen as far as the power struggle for Christian Horner to continue in his role as team principal. They're placing massive priority, as they should, on this investigation, because let's remember there is an alleged victim at the bottom of all this media speculation and rubble. There is a victim, and we should be, even in my tone, I should be cognizant of that and building at least a slither of empathy, because there is a victim potentially in this situation. However, as far as F1 fans, all that we're considering is what does Red Bull look like going forward. And I think for me, that's the meat of this story. Imagine for a second a world where Christian Horner, going into 2024 season, is no longer team principal of Red Bull. That is bonkers, peddlers. That is absolutely a game changer. And especially going into 2025, when Lewis Hamilton fans all around the world want to see Lewis in those red overalls. And what does that mean for, can he get the 8th in the Scuderia Ferrari car alongside Charles Leclerc? What's going to be the dynamic? If Christian Horner, for whatever you want to say, and people, he's Marmite, is Christian. People love and hate him in equal measure. And again, this instance discounted, I will take a lot of flack each and every single time because I quite like Christian. He's a cheeky chappy. Of course, he's a line stepper. Numerous statements. I take the other side of the Matthew Syed argument. Not that I disagree with the Matthew Syed article. Absolutely, Christian Horner is and has been and will always be a line stepper. He has that in his toolbox. But I find Christian Horner's accolades as far as what he's managed to do with Red Bull Racing since Red Bull Racing's inception in 2005, I find what he's done absolutely incredible. Lest we forget that when Red Bull bought Jaguar and came into F1, they were in fact an energy drinks company. And these type of companies with a lack of racing heritage in F1 history do not tend to do very well. This was at a time when teams were just dropping like flies, right? Due to a number of different circumstances, not least a lack of financial robustness. Jordan, Jaguar, Minardi, Toyota, like they were all dropping like flies, right? 2008 financial crisis hit the world. Like there were Honda, everybody was pulling out of F1. Nobody didn't have any discretionary spend that they could apportion to something like a frivolous activity like F1. So Christian Horner as team principal of Red Bull, not just to win all these bloody championships and sign Max Verstappen, who's the next one, and all this other stuff, but to steer the ship through very, very difficult financial times, to do a brilliant job of circling the wagons around his racing team, to race hard each and every single week, to usurp the dominant 8 times Constructors' Champions Mercedes. I mean, you've got to give him credit for that. You have to give him credit for that. Love him or hate him, love Red Bull or hate Red Bull, objectively, one has to give Christian Horner, Red Bull team principal, some credit for what he's managed to do over the last nearly 20 years. You have to. Anything shy of that is disingenuous and quite frankly inaccurate. He's been absolutely incredible for all of his foibles. Now, how does that work? Let's imagine in a couple of weeks' time, the outcome of the investigation goes against Christian Horner and he's forced to step down, as many advisors are telling him he potentially should at the moment. Again, to avoid the furore around Red Bull at a very difficult, a very critical time going into the new season, right? People apparently allegedly, conjecture Cameron F1 are advising Christian Horner that it would be best for Red Bull Racing to resign as at now. Now, Christian doesn't have that in his locker, does he? He's a street fighter of a team principal. He's not going to resign. He's going to be told to step down if it gets to that, if the outcome of the investigation goes against him. But again, we've got to wait to see how that plays out. However, let me say this. In the event that that does happen, that the outcome of the investigation from a Christian Horner perspective is adverse and he has to step down, that he's advised by Red Bull Racing Group to do so, that's massive upside for the other 9 teams on the grid. Here's why. Christian Horner has crafted a team in his image. The team principal gift is to ensure that your team are shielded from the nonsense of the strategic guys, that Red Bull Racing is a racing team. Those guys shouldn't. Hannah Schmidt and Max Verstappen and Jonathan Wheatley, they don't need to care for what's going on above here, right? With the likes of Dietrich. But whilst Dietrich was alive, Christian Horner held the whip hand. He had the trust of the guys at Red Bull Racing, at Red Bull Group, even at Salzburg. Christian Horner was Dietrich's guy. I remember Dietrich was the co-founder, part owner. He was the big dog. That's the guy, as far as key stakeholders, if you're a Red Bull Racing team principal, that's the guy who holds the pen. If you have his trust, then you're good to go. Carte blanche. Have at it, Christian. You need to make that decision. You don't even need to consult me, I imagine Dietrich Mateschitz would say, because he had Dietrich's trust. Lest we forget, however, that in 2021, Christian Horner's neck was on the chopping block. Had he not won that Drivers' Championship and placed that trophy in the hands of Max Verstappen under very controversial circumstances, Christian Horner probably would not be team principal now. Got to give him credit, right? His ability to get it done, notwithstanding very techy, very difficult circumstances. And for that, I've got to give Christian Horner props each and every single time. Again, dial that forward another 12, 24 months, however. Who would take over from Christian Horner? Again, in the event that the outcome of the investigation goes against him, humongous if, and we've got to stay tuned for that. Who would take over from that? Those are massive boots to fill. Who's got that? What, Jonathan Wheatley? Potentially. But again, the gift, the ability to get 25 points over a race weekend. Machinery, of course, is important, and they've built a brilliant, malleable foundation of a chassis. They've nailed it right. But people and ethos and work culture, all of which has been built on, or even in the image of Christian Horner's, on his shoulders, that's what gets you 25 points, right? So how's Jonathan Wheatley going to come in and steer the ship in the same way that Christian Horner has? Some of those buds at Milton Keynes will be in love with Christian Horner, quite literally. He's their leader and they will die for him. So what happens when he leaves? What happens to the work culture? What happens to the personnel that only wanted to work for Christian Horner? Do they leave? Do they go to Maranello? Do they head to Ferrari? Do they go to Mercedes? What happens? These are all unknowns, but these things have happened in the past, right? Think Ron Dennis. McLaren was Ron Dennis's McLaren. And then late 2010s, I want to say like 2007, 2008, when he's usurped. McLaren is all of a sudden then very different. Granted, Lewis Hamilton wins his championship in 2008 and they're still very, very competitive. They were, but the culture without Ron Dennis, the fabric of McLaren without a Ron Dennis at the helm is just different, tangibly, notably different, materially, just in terms of its fundamental constitution, the personnel, the people leading it, the leadership styles, just very different, right? You know that Ron Dennis was a micromanager. You'll have heard the story about Adrian Newey painting his wall purple, and Ron Dennis, whose favourite colour was grey, sees it and just completely goes off the wall. He micromanaged every millimetre of that organisation, and it worked. I don't like to be micromanaged, but it worked. So what happens when Ron Dennis leaves? The organisation goes through this transition period and becomes something different. No longer is Ron Dennis's McLaren. Ron Dennis's McLaren, and it will be similar with Christian Horner's Red Bull Racing. They will go through a transition period if indeed this is something that they have to go through. Red Bull Racing are better, more productive, more efficient in the near term with Christian Horner still at the helm. This is self-evident. It's very, very hard to argue against this. What they will become if Christian Horner leaves is a Manchester United post Sir Alex Ferguson going through the transitional wilderness. That's the truth. Even if Jonathan Wheatley is in fact a better team principal. Now, I think Jonathan Wheatley, of all of those guys currently at Red Bull Racing, is probably the heir apparent. He's the Dan Fallows to Adrian Newey, right? That's the relationship that I imagine Jonathan Wheatley has with Christian Horner, the understudy per se, in effect, the young Padawan to Christian Horner's team principal. But yeah, and still he's not Christian Horner. Just doesn't have the experience, does he? It will be different. I can imagine that across the grid, those other 9 teams will be rubbing their hands thinking, you know what? This is a win for us. This is a humongous win for us as they try to bridge the gap to Red Bull Racing. It's going to get techie. I'm telling you, peddlers, it will get techie, but I can't wait to see what happens over the next couple of weeks because it matters a lot. It is of humongous consequence, but we'll have to see how it plays out. Personally, listen, I don't really have a dog in this fight. I want to see a competitive 2024 for whatever it's worth. Many people are saying take a deferral on that. I will come back and watch F1 in 12 months' time when Lewis is in that Ferrari car. But you know what? I'm an F1 fan, so I'll be watching still in 2024. And I am invested, therefore, in a competitive 2024. That's what I want to see. That's what I want to see. And this whole hoopla, I think, enhances the case for a competitive 2024. Of course, the cars are important. And who's going to build a car that can compete with that RB20 on a weekly basis? I don't know. Ferrari maybe, Mercedes maybe. This is all massive conjecture. But sometimes we've got to talk about it, haven't we? Do me a favour, guys, and smash the like, por favor, because it all helps the channel. But I wanted to address that at the outset, guys. I'll get to your comments at the end, I promise. But I don't know. Lady T sparked me off, man. The censorship in the F1 space is a madness. If that's my guy, if I'm a Lewis Hamilton guy, most Lewis Hamilton fans will say, then I don't want to hear any criticism about Lewis Hamilton. Hence why half the world were thinking that Lewis Hamilton was still going to be at Mercedes, that it was going to be stasis. No way would he go to Ferrari. Well, if you had half a mind, if you were around in 2006 when Lewis was in GP2, you would have heard Lewis on numerous occasions talk about how it was his dream to join Ferrari. But Lewis Hamilton fans, the evangelists, the diehards that won't hear anything, that get their blinkers on, they didn't want to hear it, did they? Oh no, Lewis could never go to Ferrari. He's a Mercedes man. Through and through, ad infinitum. No, he's massively invested in that project and he'll become an ambassador. Well, they didn't offer him an ambassadorial role, did they? Ferrari did. And people argue back and forth with Nasha the other day of Quick Stop F1. And Nasha was like, listen, I listened to Lewis, and Lewis always said that he was a Mercedes guy and he's going to be at Mercedes for the rest of his life. But you guys know already that Lewis Hamilton is PhD level when it comes to PR. If he's talking about Mercedes, if he's asked about his commitment to Mercedes, he's never gonna devil's advocate that. The exam answer is yes, of course I'm committed to Mercedes. I will be here for the rest of my career and I will endeavour to win that 8th World Drivers' Championship at this team. Of course he's going to say that, but then flip the script and ask Lewis Hamilton about Ferrari, Scuderia Ferrari, and you see that twinkle in his eyes, right? when he starts to talk about his childhood dream and the romance and the heritage of that Scuderia Ferrari car, and he imagines himself doing what his childhood hero Ayrton Senna sadly never got the opportunity to do. He's a truth sayer, is Lewis, and he never once, when asked about Ferrari, said that I don't want to drive there. His steer when answering those questions was always something to the effect of, I don't know why it's never happened. I don't know, because it's not my end. I wanted to drive there, in brackets. Unwritten. And it is going to be interesting in 2025 seeing him in there, and I can't wait for it. I, for one, as much as I want to see what's kicking off in the 2024 season, I'd hoped when these rumours of Lewis joining Ferrari first came out, they were different. They were differing as far as their timelines. Some said 2024, some said 2025. And I, for one, was praying to the F1 gods that Lewis Hamilton was going to be in red overalls this year in 2024. Ugh. That's the one. That's my one regret as far as this whole deal. I think like Lewis has got absolutely everything that he wanted, and he deserves it. Ambassador role, 2+1 contract, multi-year. A lot of investment, 200 and something million investment in these altruistic charitable projects. And he deserves that, of course. Nobody can begrudge Lewis Hamilton that. But the one thing that's missing from that is an immediate start. It's a shame they could have bought him out. But you know what? Fair play. It's going to be interesting over the next 12 months to see. There are loads of plot lines. George versus Lewis, team orders, the dynamic hierarchy. What's going to happen between the two? Is George going to become the de facto Mercedes team leader? Plus, Carlos Sainz, Charles Leclerc, who's going to win over there? Let me talk to that very quickly, because I've been on Twitter causing chaos for the past 48 hours. Chaos. But I don't think... all right, let me term it this way as we round third base. I'm going to... and he hasn't hit record, of course, Cameron. So noddy. Let me talk about Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz, because as everybody's talking about Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton, what will that look like in 2025? Charles Leclerc's so amazing as a driver. He's the fastest over one lap in qualifying. Gun to the head, I'm going to pick Charles Leclerc over anyone. And I think that's all fair game. I don't hate that. Charles Leclerc is an absolute brilliant driver, reminiscent of the likes of Gilles Villeneuve and Ayrton Senna. Balls to the wall each and every single time. By counter, you guys know me. I like to check out the other side of the argument. I can't just be one way. Whilst that, all the aforementioned and all the superlatives around Charles Leclerc are absolutely worthy, warranted. He's a brilliant peddler. Let's reverse that narrative for a second and look at his vulnerable underbelly. He makes a load of mistakes. Now you can argue why potentially he doesn't have the wheels stable enough underneath him. That might be the case, but yeah, and still, as at February 2024, Charles Leclerc makes a lot of mistakes. And the only reason why I'm talking about this, because in all this hoopla around Lewis going to Ferrari, I haven't heard anybody talk about the odd man out, Carlos Sainz, and that makes me feel bad. So I contextualize that this way. Charles Leclerc has a vulnerable underbelly in that he still makes, as at February 2024, a humongous amount of unforced errors. You guys will remember Imola a couple of years back. You guys will remember Paul Ricard every single year at Monaco. He makes loads of errors, even going back recently to the very last race, Las Vegas. I will never forget, peddlers, and you check my maths on this. There was a sim race on the Friday before the Las Vegas Grand Prix that Charles Leclerc participated in with celebrities, content creators, the likes of whom, Young Philly, Jamie Chadwick. There were a couple of Chocolate Dirk. There were a few bods in there, and I remember, because I watched it live, turn 12, that little cheeky left-hander after the long straight. In that sim race, Charles Leclerc stacked it. At which point, Jamie Chadwick, who was in second place hitherto, came careering past him. Now, Charles Leclerc, right, so obviously he bridged the gap and ultimately won that sim race. But he made a mistake on the Friday in the sim race at turn 12. Overcooked it. You guys remember that little cheeky jinking left-hander. Fast forward to Sunday. Brilliant drive from Charles Leclerc. Again, this is his this is his Q4 renaissance. towards the latter stage of the 2023 season, when the car, they argued, has come back to him. It drives how he needs it to drive for him to extract the best from that Scuderia Ferrari car. Bang. Perfect. He was incredible the last 4 or 5 races and materially outperformed Carlos Sainz when the car came back to him. True, fair, take that. But if we're talking about unforced errors and Charles Leclerc, turn 12 again, remember, hold this front and centre of your mind. Friday, sim race, Jamie Chadwick, Charles Leclerc, young filly, et al. Makes a mistake, does Charles Leclerc. Turn 12 at the Las Vegas track. Sunday, fast forward, he's competing with Sergio Checo Perez. Where does he make a mistake, peddlers? Turn effing 12. What are we doing here? This is emblematic for me of a theme in Charles Leclerc's career. Check out Monaco. Every single year, as near as makes no difference at Monaco, he will make a mistake. Okay, so he's been bad lucky sometimes at Monaco, did not starts and all that stuff. The bloody pit stop debacle a couple of years back with Carlos Sainz when they brought him in and he had to dare to double stack and all this nonsense. Come in. No, don't come in, stay out. You guys all remember those messages. But Charles Leclerc, for my money, has to take some accountability. He has to be culpable for some of these circumstances. A la Brazil 2021, when in qualifying Q3, it's not raining yet. Why are you, even if Ferrari tell you you're going to put on inters, the rain's not happened yet. So why am I putting on inters now? That's the constructive challenge that a racing mind like Carlos Sainz Jr. offered back to Ferrari, and that's why he went out on slicks and set a decent lap time. Charles Leclerc's Brazil qualifying in 2021 was ruined because he lacked that assertiveness, that innate ability, that common sense approach to push back on a Scuderia Ferrari team who have made a very many strategic errors. Carlos Sainz has that in here. Charles Leclerc, for all his brilliance and his subtlety on the wheel and his fantastic inputs on the throttle and his ability to extract the best out of a car whose handling dynamic suits him, for all of that, he lacks the ability to put together, in my humble opinion, a championship worthy of becoming champion just yet. Too many enforced errors, lack of assertiveness, lack of race savvy in real time. He doesn't have that yet. Now, if you're asking me the question, which one of those would you rather? But obviously, you'd rather be quick and then build what I'm talking about. You can learn race savvy and develop it. It comes from experience and being cerebral about your racing in real time. You can build that. To be quick is much harder to learn. You can't, that innate quickness and subtlety of feel and understanding how to push a car, how to present a car through an apex for the fastest line, for the fastest A to B. That's something that's very difficult to learn. You can't give me that. I could train for another 20 years now and I would never be as fast as Charles Leclerc. So of those two features, you would rather be Charles Leclerc and have the speed and develop that. But it's still, that being said, he still needs to develop that, because what we're talking about here, Max Verstappen's not going anywhere, nor is Carlos Sainz Jr., nor is George Russell, nor is Lewis Hamilton, and there are more coming. Andrea Kimi Antonelli, who we'll get onto very shortly. There are more coming, Ollie Behrman, there are loads. So if Charles Leclerc has an aspiration, has a hope in hell of fulfilling his potential and becoming one day a World Drivers' Champion, with all of those bods on the grid, Verstappen, Lewis, Carlos Sainz Jr., George, Lando, Piastri, then that's what he needs to do. He needs to root out the unforced errors so that his brilliance can shine brightly right. So that we're not talking about Monaco or Brazil or Paul Ricard or Las Vegas or tracks around which he made material errors that cost him. Singapore's another brilliant example. I was arguing back and forth with my guy Shez, who is infinitely more knowledgeable about these circumstances than Charles Leclerc than I. Big Charles Leclerc fan. I went back and thought, let me have a look at Singapore. You know, you have to go back and watch a race sometimes and I was trying to remember, did he make a mistake in Singapore? Okay, so he made a qualifying He wasn't as quick in qualifying as he should have been. Carlos Sainz out qualified him and dropped it on pole. But it's not those type of mistakes that I'm talking about. Type of mistakes that I'm talking about with Charles is when he came into the pits now, there was a safety car, bloody Sargent had stacked it and his front wing was underneath, brought out the safety car. Both Ferraris pitted. What did Charles Leclerc do? Charles Leclerc was running about 3 seconds behind Carlos Sainz, needed to drop back another 2.5 seconds, say. What did he do? He drops back another 8 seconds. But by the time he's got too much time, then he's overcooked the ease back. The Ferrari pit garage pit Carlos Sainz, and Charles Leclerc's nowhere to be seen. And ultimately, the material consequence of that circumstance is that when they're trying to release Charles Leclerc, he's got to wait for George and Lando, who both ultimately jump him because he's given too much time. He's miscalculated the delta that he needs to manage. And that's the sort of thing, even if he was told by Ferrari, listen, this needs to be a delta, surely in real time, a driver as god tier as Charles Leclerc can look in front of him and see. You just need to eye test it right. If Carlos Sainz is like 5-6 seconds down the road, then that's perfect. That's enough time for him to pit and we can do the double stack and just carry on. What's the 8 seconds about? He's going to get swallowed up and overtaken, passed in the pits by Lando and George, who were immediate. You had a gap to them, boys. You had a gap to them, boys. When you went in the pit, Shaw, the gap was no longer. And you can watch it back and check my maths if you think I'm joking. But sometimes you've got to check your own maths. And I say this all in the name of putting some respect on Carlos Sainz's name, because I, for one, have been a massive Carlos Sainz detractor. Listen, Charles Leclerc looks like Superman. Of course, he's brilliant. Fastest driver over one lap. Of course, Karan Chunduk says so. Who am I to argue against these guys? My guy Peter Wins has been telling me as much for the longest time that Charles Leclerc could be the next one. But I say all that to say this. Carlos Sainz, when you check it, and again, sometimes it's important to go back and look at history, look at the facts, the numbers. Shez was just checking me saying that Carlos Sainz, I won't even get into that argument because it's too techy for me to explain. We were arguing about who's led more of the drivers' champion, because I'm not saying that Carlos Sainz can beat Charles Leclerc over any given race. I would put all of my chips on Charles Leclerc each and every single time. But the problem is, you guys know that speed is only one component to maximize your points over the course of a 24 race championship, right? You've got to have nous, you've got to have race savvy, endurance, resilience, the ability to minimize for unforced errors and mitigate for mistakes in real time, the ability to react to a changing variable, the ability to react to changing weather, as Carlos Sainz does each and every single time, as he did so brilliantly 2 years ago at Monaco. But for bloody Williams, a cheeky Williams release, he would have won that race because he only pitted once when everybody was pitting 2 and 3 times. And this is the sort of thing, I'm a Charles Leclerc fan. This is the sort of thing that I want to see Charles Leclerc do on a weekly. And thus far, I haven't seen it from him. And Charles Leclerc fans will come for me and tell me that I'm hating and all this nonsense. But I'm just telling it as I see it. Charles Leclerc is a brilliant driver with subpar race savvy and decision making in real time. You will see it. Now that we've talked about it, watching the 2024 season, you'll say, you know what? Cameron did say he will make mistakes, multiple ones. I'm not just talking about the big crashes in the wall. I'm talking about the inability, the Singapore pit stop, the Monaco debacle, the bloody interims in Brazil quali in 2021. Like all these sort of like decisions that ostensibly from afar should be easy to fix. He will make some more of those unforced errors. Despite notwithstanding his brilliance in the car, we'll also see him be incredible in quality. But I tell you what, if I'm critiquing F1 fans, I call it fast driver tax. Just because the driver is fast doesn't mean we have to forget that there are all these other constituent characteristics that a champion needs. Michael Schumacher is a brilliant example. David Coulthard, who knows a lot about Michael Schumacher and Mika Hakkinen, mentioned their name Spa a couple of years back. He understands because he raced these guys. And on the FFS Formula for Success podcast that you guys can go and listen to on all good podcasting platforms, David Coulthard said something to this effect. that the difference between Mika Hakkinen, Mika was probably faster than Michael Schumacher over the course of one lap. Probably at the time, 98, 99 to early 2000s, probably the fastest driver on that grid over the course of one lap, just like Charles is today. But the difference between Mika and Michael, even though Michael might have been half a tenth slower than Mika Hakkinen in qualifying, Michael then in the race had the ability to go and put 60 laps in at that same pace, whereas Mika didn't. He was like a W13, W14 of a driver in that his absolute pace in absolute terms was up there, right? But he just lacked the ability to be consistent. I think it's a brilliant comparison. That's exactly how I see Charles Leclerc today. Put some respect on Carlos Sainz's name. I say all that to say, because he has what Charles Leclerc needs: a bit of race savvy, the ability to be crafty in real time, to pull a joke and do what the other drivers aren't doing, to read the race in Monaco and say, you know what, I'm not coming in. The track is drying out. I'm coming in once. I'm going to keep this thing on the black stuff, and I'm coming in once in a couple of laps when it's dried out, and I'm putting on slicks. None of those other drivers had that ability. Senna could do that back in the day, but I'm talking about the 2024 grid. None of those other drivers were doing that. None of them. Charles Leclerc in particular. So put some respect on Carlos Sainz's name. And I'm self-critiquing here, peddlers. This is not me aiming at Charles Leclerc, Evangelist, or anyone else. This is me self-critiquing, because I also started drinking the Charles Leclerc Kool-Aid to the detriment of the way in which I was talking and addressing Carlos Sainz. Oh, Carlos Sainz isn't as quick as Charles Leclerc, Cameron F1 said. Well, that might be true, but he's industrious and tenacious enough to bridge that gap. Just go and look. I challenge you guys. Just go and look at how close they were. Carlos Sainz, but for the dodgy FIA and the Las Vegas pothole, Carlos Sainz Jr. would have beaten Charles Leclerc in 2 of 3 of the seasons that they've competed in together for Ferrari. Now, of course, there is a bedding in period that you've got to take account of that, right? That Charles Leclerc was new in the Ferrari in that first year, and he's got to take time to adapt. You've got to account for that in this waterfall scenario. But yet and still, if you think about that without checking, there's no way that I would have said Carlos Sainz Jr., the driver that he is, should be anywhere near close to Charles Leclerc. Not 2 of 3. I think that's fascinating. Yeah, this is the way that you remember things, right? And oftentimes it's different to how it actually happened. Again, the analogy there, the comparator. If you check out Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg, the first season that they competed with, they finished, I want to say circa maybe 20 points. The following 2 seasons, Lewis was gapping Nico Rosberg 60 points down the road as far as their cumulative points tally. 60 points. Nowhere near. And in that sense, 2016, when Nico Rosberg took advantage of some fortuitous circumstances to ultimately beat his childhood friend Lewis Hamilton, you know that was anomalous, right? I am keen then to see, if we're looking at plots for 2024, I'm keen to see how it plays out between the 2 Ferrari drivers. Charles Leclerc, Evangelist, will say as soon as he gets the car underneath him, he'll destroy Carlos Sainz Jr. But you know what, peddlers? I don't think it's that simple. Carlos Sainz has things as a race driver that are advantageous that Charles Leclerc doesn't have. And breathe, Cameron. Shout out to you guys in the chat, man, listening to me ramble on. I feel like I've come in. Lady T's got me hot first thing this morning, man. Like I saw that comment, I was like, nah. We got to address some things. 136 of you watching concurrently. Do me a favor, smash the like. If you're watching on YouTube, comment and subscribe. Por favor. If you're listening on podcasting platform, follow. 5 stars. Lastly on this, who's going to be Lewis Hamilton's replacement? I'm going long, peddlers. You noticed that at the outset I didn't do the chairman thing and say I'm going to go for however long. I'm going to go for, there is an allocation here and I need to get my points out. I will read some of your comments shortly and then I'm running away. Lewis Hamilton's replacement. Now, Toto Wolff, you guys know that Listen, I've got to give Toto Wolff props. And again, this is where Peter Windsor, Lady T, has checked me on my characterization of Toto Wolff's achievements. Because I haven't been, over the past 24 months, because of the design and the chassis and the nose side pods, whatever, I haven't been the biggest fan of Toto Wolff. Is he partially culpable for that? Of course. Can we wholly attribute the downfall of Mercedes as far as their performance on track over the past 24 months to one Toto Wolff? Well, that's not fair. And I've kind of been on that train. Toto, you need to sort it out. You're the leader. You're the team principal. You're the bloody CEO with the 50% shares alongside Sir Jim Radcliffe and all this other nonsense. I hold you responsible. And again, to self-critique, I don't think that's quite right, Cameron. I'm walking some of what I've said back about Toto Wolff, because not dissimilar to the characterization of Christian Horner earlier, Toto and his accolades, 8-time world constructors champion. Like, I mean, that's not easy to do, right? Not just to climb the mountain, but to stay at the top for 8 seasons. That's no small feat. The most dominant team in F1 history, right, as far as consecutive constructors championships, I think. That's no small feat, and he's absolutely worthy of praise, worthy of more praise than I've given him in short order in recent times. Absolutely, and I will walk that back in each and every single time. Toto Wolff's DNA goes throughout Mercedes. And sadly, if Toto Wolff were to leave, if we were looking at a similar circumstance to Red Bull potentially, the team would be different. Some of those guys would live and die for Toto Wolff. Again, not dissimilar to Christian Horner's circumstance. However, he's got to take some flack. He has to take some flack because he tried a thing and he ended up barking at the wrong tree as far as the zero pod circumstance, and people tried to warn them about the porpoising and they're just porpoising even, and technical arrogance had them continue to bark up the wrong design philosophy tree, and that's not good enough. For Lewis Hamilton fans and Mercedes fans around the world, we will hold that forever against Toto Wolff because ultimately he's partially responsible. However, and I say all that to say this, listen, it looks like, at face value, that in not offering Sir Lewis Carl Davidson Hamilton a multi-year contract, that in not giving him the big bucks and matching what Ferrari have offered him, which by all accounts is anywhere between 80 million and 100 million euros per year, mind, by not offering him, by not upping your investment in Lewis Hamilton's altruistic charitable projects, by not offering him that ambassadorial role after he retires, it looks like Toto Wolff, as at now, February 2024, it looks like Toto Wolff has dropped the bag, doesn't it? It looks like a fatal error, especially when you consider the strengths that he's taking across the Ferrari, the fact that Shove and Bono and numerous others may potentially follow him over there as key personnel. It looks like he's dropped the bag, particularly, not least, the luxury brand, the combination of brand Hamilton alongside brand Scuderia Ferrari. This is insanity. It's bonkers. A bigger conglomerate of brands in F1 we've never seen. Brand Hamilton and brand Scuderia Ferrari. Are you having an absolute giraffe? Like, that is power. 6 billion worth if you talk to Ferrari shareholders. That is absolutely ridiculous. So it looks like, as at now, February 2024, that in not offering Toto, and Toto's not offering Sir Lewis Hamilton favourable contractual circumstances, ambassadorial roles, multi-year contracts, and increased investment in all of his altruistic charitable projects, that Toto Wolff somehow, after a lengthy period of success, after a record-breaking period of constructor success, that Toto Wolff has dropped the bag. That's what it looked like. However, I want to, peddlers, I need to play the other side here. I have to. Let's remember, I think there will be a lot of very many eyes on F2 this year. I'm not a big F2, or I haven't been a big F2 watcher because I just don't bloody have time. Family, kids, work and all that stuff. You guys know the drill. Bandwidth is a finite resource by definition. I can't watch 2 Formula. I'm F1 through and through. But this year, going to make an exception because F2 is absolutely stacked. Don't believe me? Go and watch my mate Tomo F1. Tomo F1's done a brilliant video on F2 that will bring you right up to speed for the 2024 season. Ollie Bearman is a driver alongside some chap called Andrea Kimi Antonelli. I say all that to say this. There are, for the first time in a few years, a plethora of driver that you can literally pick up and drop after a couple of seasons, probably after this season, that you can just pick up and drop in an F1 car. Most notably, Ollie Bearman, still on the Ferrari, on the books of Ferrari, I think. But again, with the Lewis Hamilton transfer, things may be subject to change. And Andrea Kimi Antonelli, who many people are talking about as the next Ayrton Senna. I had doubts. Mark Hughes, the legend, posted an article talking in very loose terms about some private test at which Andrea Kimi Antonelli was seconds quicker than the rest in the wet. And you guys know that in the wet, you see the goods from the greats because it zones in on feel and an understanding where grip is on the track at any particular given time. And apparently, if Mark Hughes is to be taken at his word, big if, Andrea Kimi Antonelli was 2 seconds, was a couple seconds quicker than anybody else on the track that day. Do I understand? Do I know for a fact that all of the other F2 drivers were at that test? I'm not sure they were. So context is key, right? If Ollie Bearman is at that test and Kimi Antonelli in the wet is 2 seconds than his teammate in Prema, Ollie Bearman, that's game changing. That's game changing. But everybody that I talked to, I pedaled back some of my Andrea Kimi Antonelli optimism. This is why I'm telling you guys this. I hope he's the next Ayrton Senna, the next Max Verstappen, the next Lewis Hamilton. I hope, because from an F1 plot line perspective, it's a juicy story, right? There are stakes, and then they can slot him in that Mercedes car, and he's just going to be amazing. And Toto will end up looking like a genius. However, I had to walk it back. Because I'm not sure. Hearsay sometimes has a way of leaning into a confirmation bias. Me too. I just talked about Charles Leclerc, right? Just because he looks like Superman and Clark Kent, that doesn't mean he is going to be. He looks like a champion, right? He's quick like a champion, but he lacks the fundamental traits of the most recent champions, right? Being race savvy and strategy. And Kimi Antonelli might be similar. We will see this F2 season. But then I talked to somebody else in the know, a friend of the channel, and they spoke about another instance where Kimi Antonelli was just god tier on a cheeky sim race with another F2 driver on a similar setup. The more that I talk to people about Kimi Antonelli, the more that all the arrows are pointing in the same direction. I think, peddlers, that Kimi Antonelli could win F2 this year or go very close. And my crystal ball is as murky as the next man's. I don't know anything. So I'm just trying to connect the dots preemptively, and we're having a conversation here. I hope that Kimi Antonelli nails it. If he beats, even if he doesn't win it, right, if he can beat Ollie Bearman, his teammate, this year coming, how can you argue against Toto Wolff just slotting him in that Lewis Hamilton shaped seat for 2025? I cannot. And then in that instance, in that eventuality, if Andrea Kimi Antonelli is the next one, Toto Wolff allowing Scuderia Ferrari to steal his charge, Sir Lewis Hamilton, from underneath his nose, might look like a queen's sacrifice. It might be a boss move. If Kimi Antonelli is the next one, Andrea Kimi Antonelli, the young Italian that reminds me of Senna when I look at him, Senna with an Italian accent, if he's the next one, then Toto Wolff in about 24, 36 months time might look like an absolute genius, especially if Mercedes, the guys and girls at Brackley and Brixworth, can build themselves a car. Stay tuned. We will be watching F2. But then, listen, if Kimi Antonelli isn't the one, who's the next one? if you're Toto Wolff, guys, who are you putting in that car? I was thinking about that this morning. I was like, Alex Albon, I don't know. Alex Albon, I know he's a good friend of George Russell. I don't know. Alex Albon is very, very good. He is good. Is he good enough to fill the shoes of Sir Lewis Hamilton, though? It's techie, isn't it? Very, very techie. Here's my suggestion, and we've mentioned him already a couple of times this year. He's looking for a seat in 2025, so I hear. One Carlos Sainz Jr. Again, look, if we're comparing and contrasting, if we think that Charles Leclerc could potentially be one of the next ones, and Carlos Sainz could have beaten him in 2 of 3 championships. If you look at the whole sum, if you look at this situation holistically, then if Toto Wolff signs Carlos Sainz Jr. for the 2025 season, he could be getting himself a bargain. I think Carlos Sainz Jr. is probably the most underrated driver on the grid in 2024. I will say that. Absolute pace, okay, so he's not the quickest, but he more than makes up for that in other features, other talents, the ability to read a race in real time, race savvy, making a decision, driving in the wet and changeable conditions and making strategic decisions correspondingly. Carlos Sainz Jr. Telling you, right, guys, I know I've gone long. I apologize each and every single time, but you guys are going to see a lot more of me over the next couple of weeks. I'm going to hit this thing hard. I have had enough peddlers. I'm looking to take over the game, man. And plus, you know what? Moreover, I will say this as I try and adjust my screen here. You guys are more, you guys are better placed, and I'll talk another 10-15 minutes, peddlers. I need to read some of your comments because I appreciate you each and every single time joining me on these ramblings. But as far as the F1 space, there are a couple content creators that I watch. Listen, the obvious ones, you know, I'm not even going to read out. No. Tomo, Aldas, Quickstop F1, Josh Revel, Driver 61. There are the obvious McLaren Fan TV, Pit Stop. There are serious ones out there, but I'm a big documentary watcher. For you guys who watch YouTube, the likes of Johnny Harris and Dodford, like I watch documentaries, right? And I'm not seeing, I would love to watch an F1 documentary crafted in the image of the aforementioned, right? A Johnny Harris talking about F1. But where is that? It doesn't exist in the space. So over the next, I don't know, I don't want to give myself a timeline and then flop and massively overshoot, as I do normally on these live chats. We will be here for 30 to 45 minutes, Cameron says, and then 90 minutes later, I'm still rabbiting on. I don't want to set myself a timeline and overshoot that. But I am desperate to start making proper documentary pieces that are well produced. Hopefully, over the next, I don't know how long. Because I want to watch them, right? No one's making those pieces, really. Just properly in-depth storytelling, well-edited, well-produced. I've done a couple of them. But I tried to stick to a schedule and ended up kind of rushing them out. The ones that will come out soon will be perfect. Do me a favor and like this video, and don't forget to subscribe, headers. Right, live chat time. Let's have a chat. Chad agreed with the sign. It would be a good one, Chad. I'm telling you, it would be a very good one. I don't even know how to. Merck always had a driver's champ in their car. Alonso makes sense. Oh my gosh. Does Alonso make sense, really? I think Alonso makes sense if you're looking for a stock. Say you deem that Kimi Antonelli is probably 2-3 years away from being ready. He could still be the next one, but he just needs a bit of a longer lead time. If that's the assumption, if you want to plug Alonso in there as a placeholder, then that would make sense. Madeline Sainz at Red Bull. You know what though, Madeline? You read my mind. My thoughts this morning were that Red Bull and Mercedes, that Carlos Sainz represents, he's the guy for both of them in that number 2 seat, right? He could be potentially the best number 2 on the grid. Look at me disrespecting him again after I said I was going to put some respect on Carlos Sainz's name, and now I'm talking about him in number 2 terms. But no, I agree. I think Mercedes and Red Bull are going to be fighting over him. Perfect to replace Checo Perez. Perfect. Most perfect to replace Lewis Hamilton. I am lazy dog. So many good F1, F2 drivers and no seats, and that's why we need an 11th team. I absolutely agree with that. I was a bit agnostic as far as Andretti. I knew Andretti, everybody knew Andretti were never going to make it. F1's still very gatekeepy, isn't it? And has always been. And probably will always be. Since the Bernie and Max days, and it's always been quite an exclusive, like, private English gentleman's club, hasn't it? So you could see from 10,000 miles away that Andretti had no hope, but you raised a good point. We could do with another couple of teams on the grid, right? So that some of these young guns, the likes of a Behrman, the likes of an Antonelli, the likes of a Frederick Vesti, the likes of a Teo Pourchaire. I mean, these guys that are sat on the, you know what I mean? Drogovic, these guys are sat on the bloody sideline at the moment. I mean, their talents and careers are wasting, particularly Drogovic and Pourchaire, both of whom they're the most recent F2, winning F2 and then sitting on the sideline for 2 years. I don't know if that's acceptable. It doesn't feel right, does it? It doesn't feel right. Albon has already been offered the Red Bull drive. So 2JZ, great engine as always. I understand it ever so slightly differently, the Albon situation. I think Red Bull, it's a first option deal, what they've given him, right? I know my guy Windsor was aware of conversations ongoing that they were going to offer him that seat, but it's a first option. It's very different to like a substantive contract, right? So I don't know. I disagree. I think you onto something there to JZ, but I don't know. Jack, do you ever think over the course of a season Sainz can beat Russell? Personally, I think he does, even though Russell is more assertive than Charles. I just think Sainz would just have his number, says Jack. Jack's it's a brilliant statement, you know. Sainz versus Russell. Oh man, I can't decide that, you know. I think Carlos Sainz, Russell in his current form, I think Carlos Sainz might be a bit too, like, have a bit more finesse than George, a bit too consistent and a bit too experienced. I think George's highs will be higher, not dissimilar to Charles, right? George's highs will be higher, but his average points haul that he takes home, Carlos will beat him on consistency, as at now. But then I think George's ceiling is higher than Carlos's. I think that's fair to say. But in 2024, 2025, if it happens, that's when it will be happening. I think Carlos will probably have just a bit too much for George. Just a bit too much. It'd just be a bit more well-rounded than George, you know? Madeline says, Sainz always went to a better team when changing teams. Red Bull is the obvious choice if he agrees to play Nico Rosberg for Max. But then, Madeline, I think Carlos Sainz is, in his own mind at the very least, looking to be a champion one day. And that number 2 seat in Red Bull has been a bit of a poison chalice, right? Then again, you frame all this. If you are a driver on the F1 grid, what do you want to do more than anything as far as your decision to get in it? You want to be in a car capable of winning the championship. You want to be in a car capable of winning the championship. You do. So if you have the opportunity to be in the Red Bull in that sense, you got to take it, eh? I don't know. Rabika says, Carlos is too consistent. He's levels consistent. I feel bad for him, but for Las Vegas potholery, he would be 2 of 3 versus Charles Leclerc, and that says something. If people rate Charles Leclerc that highly and Carlos Sainz is able to push him that far and that close, not over one season like a Nico Rosberg, but over 2-3 seasons, mate, I don't know. Googly, Valtteri Bottas is heading back to Mercedes. Behave, Googly. It's an option, and he's very good. You've got to, if you're looking at favourites, if you're picking favourites, you've got to look at the guys who are still very close with Toto, right, in the first instance. And those are obviously Valtteri and Esteban. So Bottas and Ocon might be. I don't know. It's all speculation. CBD, Carlos is the best number 2 of the grid, but the problem is he doesn't think he's a number 2. Alonso in that Mercedes would be justice for us. So I completely agree. Perfume, hi, do you think Antonelli is going to be Mercedes in 2025? So this is the debate that we're having. Perfume, like, I'm going for it. You know what? I think he'll be in there. I think Kimi Antonelli, listen, it's one of those ones when you hear a couple of rumours saying that Kimi Antonelli could be the next one, you've got to brush it off and take it with a pinch of salt, yeah? But when you hear so many trusted sources, reputable guys that know wheel say that Kimi Antonelli could be the next one, the dots all start to line up, right? And these aren't people that I don't trust when talking about racing or whose opinions are a bit flat. These are like serious people now all saying that Kimi Antonelli could well be the next Max Verstappen. I mean, it skipped out a series, right? So who goes from Formula Regional to F2? You meant to go to F3? So he's already like his trajectory, his like growth path. He's looking and feeling a little bit like Max Verstappen's. If he goes and smashes out F2 in his maiden season, a feat that only a couple of others have managed, mention no names, Charles Leclerc and George Russell, then, listen, he's ready, isn't he? He's ready. Quick Scott, Russell might struggle with anyone that can push him. I think he's got to use this year to learn as much as he can from Lewis and stabilise his position as the leader of the team. He's got to get the jump on the next one, whether that's Carlos or Alex or Kimi Antonelli. He's kind of got to use this time, and he kind of do that through performances, right? There are different styles of leadership. People leverage leadership in different ways, right? George kind of needs to lead. He's already done that. You can see that he thinks on his feet, and he's not adverse to playing a joker as far as strategy and overstepping his teammate. George has that in his toolbox, but I think now he needs to filter out, not dissimilar to Charles Leclerc, the unforced there, as you guys will remember Singapore. It's almost like you could smell his second victory, and he didn't chew his food properly, did he? Like he was just he was trying to grab at it before he set it up, and that was a rookie mistake. Schoolboy. Nenge, Mercedes needs something big fast, either from the car or from the driver, or combo of Mercedes pit stop strategy. It's all of the above, Nenge. If it depends on your framing, right? If they want to continue, if they want to close the gap to Mercedes, then incremental gains is good, right? But if they want to win another world championship, then they need big things. But sadly, at this stage of the development cycle, your gains are all incremental. You're not going to find a double diffuser thing that's going to gain you like half a second, even though that's what Ferrari is saying that they've gained. Like, it's all like, do you know what I mean? It's all small incremental gains, tinkers. You're going to find like 0.05 here, and you're going to save a little bit of weight here. And then, do you know what I mean? And then you're going to adjust your suspension here, and then you're going to get a more stable and the cumulative total of all those changes are going to get you a tenth, maybe. Rarely at this stage of the design philosophy cycle are you going to do something that's going to gain you like 0.6 or 0.7. I mean, that's not to say it's not possible, but I don't think it's feasible. It doesn't happen too often. Alan B, I think we will see a different Lewis this year. Nothing to lose now. George is going to get battered off. Potentially, Alan B. Potentially. Although, lest we forget that Lewis, despite a losing first season alongside George, Lewis beat him roundly last year. It all depends on how Mercedes develop the car. If they've got stable rear and a chassis that suits the way that Lewis drives the geometric racing line / short corners, depending on like if they have that, if they have a malleable, adjustable chassis that gives Lewis Hamilton the confidence that he needs to extract the most out of that setup, that package, then I think you've got to go George. I don't know. Matthew, Max and Adrian could possibly get. I know, Matthew, that's bonkers, you know. Max and Adrian could possibly go to. No, Matthew, what am I doing? I'm not going to indulge that. I think the big chat is around Adrian. Depending on what happens with Christian, where's Adrian going to go? Now, there was talk of there being dual clauses in Adrian and Christian's contract. That there were clauses in both in Adrian's contract saying that if Christian left, then he could exercise a clause also to leave. But since we've heard from sources that that's not quite the case, and that apparently Adrian and Christian's relationship has become quite fractured. And if you speak to guys in the know who have worked with Adrian, knew that although he's a genius, working with those very intelligent, game-changing type of people is difficult. It's never going to be easy because they're going to want to do their thing a certain way, and you're going to have to give them the requisite wiggle room. And that's why Christian Horner's done really, really well, right? To sign Adrian Newey and to keep hold of him, despite all the other teams wanting to sign him. Adrian Newey at Ferrari, potentially, I don't know. David, did Cam really say he tries to be objective and they say comedies that... David, I'm not having that. I'm not having it at all. Listen, I'm a Lewis Hamilton fan, self-confessed. But I'm an F1 fan first and have always been. So listen, that's not to say that I won't get things wrong, but I'm not having, Mr. Reed, that I am deliberately biased. That's not true. And if you look at my takes down the years, you will always see a sliver of subjectivity. But the lion's share of my takes and the way in which I ingest F1 is objective, Mr. Reed. So how very dare you, sir? Madeline Cam, you think Max can win more than 19 races this year? It's hard, Madeline. You saw that the Red Bull should have won every single race last year, but there's always going to be like a Singapore where the bloody contours, where they've reset. There's always going to be a joker that kind of switches it up a little bit, you know? It's a very difficult task to win all the races. CBD with Lewis moving. I think something serious is cooking at Ferrari. A lot of people are leaving Mercedes and Red Bull rumours are going wild. CBD, he could pop off. But again, with David Reed's comment front and centre of my brain, I don't want to... I hope... F1 fans around the world have the propensity to confuse hope with certainty, right? I hope that Lewis goes to Scuderia Ferrari and does really well, but I'm not gonna look at these objective facts in a way that confirms my confirmation bias, that allows me to indulge in the hope more. I just can't. It's never been my way. David Reed, just don't have it. How man think like you, Max, will get on this season? She says he'll do well. Yeah, he's a massive betting favourite. A humongous odds-on favourite. I think the betting odds are like he wins 70-80% of the time the championship. Cam is an F1 fan. He's more Max fan now. I'm a fan of Max because he's so good, Rabico, of course. How can you not be a fan? For me to say that I'm not a Max Verstappen fan, he's a bloody good driver, isn't he? Let's be honest. We've been Cam, last one, guys, and then I'm going to run because I can hear my little man in the background. I'll read these last two. With Ben, says Cam, those races that were up for grabs last year, that Leclerc and Norris fumbled, will be Lewis's to win this year, don't you think? There's so much to bake in that with Ben. Would I be surprised if Lewis gets a race victory this year? What would surprise me is that Mercedes package, not Lewis. If you give Lewis a package worthy, capable of winning races, Lewis will win them, right? I would be surprised if with this 48-month lead time over the rest, that Mercedes have now all of a sudden, with James Allison back as a bum in a seat at Brackley, if they've managed to build themselves a car capable of winning a race or two. That's what will surprise me. Biased. David says biased and objective. What are you talking about, David? Look, check this out now. These things aren't mutually exclusive. Can you shoot for objectivity with a sliver of bias? Of course. Like, to say that any one of us is devoid as bias, as human beings is disingenuous. I can argue that day and night with you, David, if you want to. Like, those two things aren't mutually exclusive. Like, you can shoot to be objective with a sliver of bias. Am I saying that I have zero bias? Absolutely not. I'd be a mug to say something like that. But am I saying that I do a decent job of shooting for objectivity, especially when considering other drivers like Carlos Sainz Jr. as an example, who I'm not a massive fan of? You just heard me diatribing on him, going deep on Carlos Sainz Jr. for the past half an hour and revisiting, self-critiquing my initial judgments of Carlos Sainz as a subpar driver, and that he's not, David. One of many examples, mate, if you watch the channel. Jack, should Merck pull a rabbit out of the hat this year and have the car to beat? Who should they make number one? Well, the exam answer to that question, Jack, is George Russell, because he's the future and Lewis Hamilton is going away. But if you still listen to Toto Wolff, he's still saying that he's invested in getting Lewis Hamilton his 8th. I have no idea. Matthew Brown says, Cam, you're probably one of the most objective podcasters I know. Matthew, mate, when I read a comment like that, Matthew, you have me tearing up, honestly. And listen, we try, right? You guys will hear me on the shakedown arguing back and forth. Baxty and Shez always check me. Mr. Peter Windsor, the legend that is, will always check me, and I'll push back on him. I think that's not dissimilar to other YouTubers. I know Tomo talks similarly about this conversation and back and forth. That for me is the joy, right, of talking around F1 that we got. And that's the reason why I have this platform, and you guys can come in here and criticize me, and David Reed can incorrectly tell me that I'm biased and lack objectivity. Like, there is challenge and there is friction. This is not a dictatorship. I want to have that conversation. Chad, like, I encourage you guys to come in and check me and put forth a line of argument that's better than mine. Is not the best argument every single time. There are people out there who are infinitely more info. I just talked about F2. I can't talk about F2 because I really don't have time to watch it. The likes of Tomo and Aldas are like deep into it, right? And you talk to Windsor. Peter Windsor knows everything every single time. So I'm not claiming to be the line on each and every single one of these. I'm just putting forth my opinion as best I can and trying to frame it with as much evidence as possible each and every single time. Right, guys. Yeah, cheers for that, David. I've gone back and forth with you enough, man. And there's loads of other people whose comments, sadly, I'm not going to get to. But I appreciate the back and forth. Guys, you guys have been legends. Thank you so much for indulging my F1 ramblings this Sunday afternoon. I appreciate each and every single one of you. Ad infinitum, to the moon and back. Genuinely, I'm going to be smashing out videos over the next couple of weeks. So, no, David, I appreciate you, man. David, listen, I wouldn't be going back and forth with you if I didn't enjoy it, right? This is the back and forth, and you're entitled to your opinion, and sometimes we've got to agree to disagree respectfully. This is debating and mooting and life. Sadly, F1 doesn't take this, and hence why I'm out here trying to create a platform that's different to a very many out there. But I digress. Exactly this menace. Smash the like for me, por favor. It all helps. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, drop a comment. If you are listening on a podcasting platform, follow and leave a 5-star review. It all matters. As always, until next time, between now and then, look, but never stare. Peace.